academic colleagues. I welcome you all this afternoon. Thanking you for joining in this wonderful session again. And today we have our guest um, from the who is currently the scientific and technical advisor for the Micronesia Center for Sustainable Transport. It's Dr. Peter Roger Nutall. Just a short bio for our visiting academic who is going to be presenting on Brown Bag series this afternoon. He is Dr. Nutall. Since 2013, he has led the development of a multidisciplinary research and teaching program to underpin transition to low-carbon sea transport for Pacific Island countries. This includes research at the international level into the interface between the climate change negotiations and international shipping regulations under IMO and UNFCCC processes, as well as options available for Pacific Islands at regional, national, and local level for more affordable, appropriate, and sustainable transport solutions. The Micronesian Center for Sustainable Transport leads a partnership of researchers backstopping Pacific High Ambition members states at IMO on GHG reduction negotiations since 2015, where these members are widely recognized as catalytic in driving a 1.5-degree agenda. His recent work includes research design of a universal mandatory GHG levy for shipping proposed by Marshall and Solomon Islands. In a pre-academic life, Peter worked as a wooden boat builder and commercial sailor, captain, and has sailed much of the Pacific Ocean over 30 years. He lives with his captain and two young crew on a small wooden sailing ship that operates almost exclusively on low-carbon technologies and renewable energy. He has researched heavily on traditional Pacific sailing technologies and culture, and he's also an adjunct professor here at the University of Fiji. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let us welcome our guest this afternoon, who is going to take us through the very thing that I've just mentioned a while ago. Bulavanaka, Dr. Nutall.
Yeah, Bulavanaka Masisi, and thank you so much for that warm welcome. And good afternoon, colleagues. Can you hear me okay, Masisi? Is audio all right?
I beg your pardon, Dr. Nutall. I think your volume of the mic is pretty low. I would probably request SETA, if the IT team there to support, please, to help out.
Can you hear me better now?
Now, I wouldn't know whether it's my speaker that's playing up, or maybe if anyone who is anyone in the audience, if you can just indicate if you can hear Dr. Nutall or not.
Can you hear me better now, Masisi? Hello? Is that better now? I'll take the headphones out. Yes, you can hear me? Excellent.
So Lillian says that he can hear you. Shweta says that she can hear you. I think the problem is from my side, but don't worry, everything is good. Go ahead, Dr. Nutall, the floor is yours.
Excellent, thank you so much, Masisi, and I see lots of thumbs up there. So greeting colleagues, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to try and take you through a short presentation. Looking at the potential for decarbonising shipping in Fiji, and talk you through some of the work that we've been doing at the Micronesian Centre for Sustainable Transport. We're based out of the Marshall Islands. We work for the Marshall Islands government, but we're a resource for the entirety of the Pacific. So let's start with the history. We have this crisis right across the Pacific at the moment in our domestic shipping. Very poor quality shipping, old boats, very unreliable, lots of problems with our domestic shipping. But this problem's only really occurred in the Pacific in the last couple of 100 years. And if we go back a little bit in history, back to the time when Europeans were first starting to turn up on our ocean, they met an ocean that was completely full of sail. There was no issues with domestic sea transport 200 years ago. And in fact, Fiji possessed some of the most advanced, most fastest, most efficient sea transport in the world. This watercolour here is from 1855, and it's when the US XX expedition came out to Fiji, the first Americans to sail into Fiji, and they were met by a fleet of Tanawa's drua, 20 drua strong, up to 300 men per drua, on craft that were going at such speed that the American commander at the time said that he refused to estimate the speed for fear of being called a liar on his return to America. These were advanced craft capable of traveling at great speed, traveling in fleets in bowler or fleets of up to 100 vessels at a time, carrying 200 to 300 warriors, and capable of extreme blue water voyaging. These boats were all built in the southern Lao because of the besi timber that grew down there on your limestone islands. They were built by the Makui Sao and the Makui Tonga and the Lamaki from Samoa. They were a unique cross-cultural collaboration where Micronesian sails met Fijian wood and Tongan navigators and Samoan boat craftsmen to produce a vessel that at the time was the most fastest and most efficient vessel in the world. And you can see we've got very few early photographs of the big drua, but this drua down here, I think they've counted 97 people on this one boat. Up here in the top left-hand corner, of course, is Ebola Singapore. This is a small drua. It's an exact replica of the Raku Whenau in the Suva Museum. And this is a craft that my oldest son, Sam London, and myself and Kaiafa Lendua, Setariki Lendua built a few years ago in order so that we could try and revitalise the sailing heritage of Fiji.
Beg your pardon, Dr. Nutall. Your slide seems not to be moving. If you can just please, IT team from Suva.
Sorry about the technical problems, people. Our expert team will have it fixed in a jiffy. Just load showing up now for you, Ms. Ceci?
I'm praying that it shows to my side.
Set? Better now?
Oh, lovely, wonderful.
Okay. So did you didn't see that slide at all on the first one? I'm just talking about the fleet of great drua that used to populate Fiji waters. These were exported across to Samoa, to Tonga, to Tokelau, New Caledonia, Uvea, Futuna. These were the battleship of choice of any naval commander back in the day, capable of speeds in excess of 15 knots and capable of sailing 45 degrees on the wind. So that's the history. Back 200 years ago, no issues with your sea transport. Every large bay in the Pacific would have a large vessel in it. People sailed at will. No issues with having to pay for your transport because the wind was free and you had superior sailing capacity. So that was your situation a couple of hundred years ago. So let's fast forward to today, and we've got this major issue of climate change, all these carbon and other greenhouse gases being emitted into the atmosphere. And this issue of shipping has become a major issue in the climate change debate. Shipping, if it was a country, and international shipping, of course, operates outside of national borders, so it doesn't belong to any single country. You can have a ship that's owned by a Greek man and might be chartered by a Danish company, flagged in the Marshall Islands, crewed by an Egyptian captain and Filipino crew, and might be carrying cargo from Russia to China. So these are very much international emissions. They don't count within any country's emissions profile. But if shipping was a country, it would be the 6th largest emitting country in the world, somewhere between Japan and Germany. So shipping producers, international shipping producers, somewhere between 2 and 3% of world shipping. So quite a large proportion. But the entire problem that we have with shipping is the speed at which shipping is growing. Shipping is essential for world trade. We can't have global economy without it. All our goods, if you look around where you're sitting right at the moment, almost all the goods in front of you will have been brought into Fiji by a ship. And shipping is growing at an exponential rate. And so this is the real issue, is that if we can't control the emissions coming out of shipping, then they will just continue to escalate until they take up a major proportion of global emissions. If we want to decarbonize world shipping, shipping needs to stop emitting now and come down very, very quickly. And so this is a paradigm shift that's required. Shipping, of course, uses heavy fuel oil, or big ships use heavy fuel oil, marine diesel oil, some of the dirtiest pollutant in the world, absolutely the scrapings out of the bottom of the refinery. So these are some of the most polluting carbon sources in the world. And it's a real issue about how do we abate this sector given how essential it is to world trade. This is a challenge that the Pacific took on, led by the Marshall Islands and the Solomon Islands, and joined by a coalition of Pacific Island countries, including Fiji, Tonga, Vanuatu, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Nauru, Samoa, and others. And so the Pacific has been raising this issue in the International Maritime Organization, the UN body that regulates global shipping, since 2015. And the Pacific has successfully led a paradigm shift in shipping decarbonisation. In 2018, the Pacific countries forced a target of reductions by at least 50% by 2050, and we went back to the table in last year in 2023, and we have now created a situation where shipping has gone from being a climate laggard to now being one of the most progressive industries in the world, and has adopted targets of 100% by 2050. So that's full decarbonisation in one generation. It requires a paradigm shift to do there. It is going to require new vessels, new fuels, new technologies, a total revolution in world shipping. Our colleagues at the University College of London estimate that the cost of this transition is somewhere north of $1.5 trillion to be spent in the next 20 years. So an enormous economic investment opportunity for shipping. The Pacific has also managed to secure agreement at the International Maritime Organization that this transition needs to be equitable. It needs to be fair for all countries in the world. We can leave no state behind. And the Pacific has proposed the most ambitious carbon pricing mechanism in the world, a universal mandatory levy on all greenhouse gas emissions coming out of shipping, at $150 a tonne. We started at $100 a tonne. Shipping didn't listen, and so we raised, doubled down on that and raised the entry price for that at $150 a carbon a tonne. Now, such a levy, if it's enacted, and we will know we have another 12 months of negotiation to go. At the moment, it's the front-running measure in front of the International Maritime Organization. But if that was successful, that levy would bring in something like $80 to $100 billion a year of climate revenues. And the Pacific has been arguing very strongly that the majority of those funds needs to come to the global south, and in particular, small island developing states and lesser developed economies. Huge political arm wrestle, and the Pacific is now recognized as a very serious negotiating bloc at the IMO. It's won international respect at the highest level of the shipping industry for the work that it is doing, and is considered a very serious player. So for the last 8-9 years, we've had small delegations from the Pacific yo-yoing back and forth to London every few months in these negotiations, but we are making serious progress. So it looks like shipping is now on the cusp of transitioning away from fossil fuel into a new generation of shipping that will be carbon free. What does this really mean for us at home though? Back here at home, as you know, this is modelling work that's just been done for us by our colleagues at the University College of London, trying to model all the shipping across the Pacific. And these two slides on the left-hand side show you the domestic shipping in 2019 around our Fijian islands. So you can see spokes of shipping working around from Suva, around to Lautoka, up to the Yasawas, out into the Lau group, up into Vanua Levu. These little dots, of course, are all your little shipping boats out here, and we have these incredibly long runs to our vulnerable isolated communities up in Ratuma, down into the southern Lao. Very long routes, 300 to 400 miles each leg of the route. It's blue water. These are dangerous waters, and so we have to have blue water capable ships capable of providing this service. This comes at incredible cost, of course, to the government to subsidise, and the reality is that the amount of traffic that's happening domestically really isn't enough to justify the cost of running all these ships around your islands. When we move to the regional level, you can see all the shipping that's focused around Fiji, and Fiji is a transport hub for many countries in the Pacific. And you can see the hub and spoke here, going out to Tonga, up to Samoa, and to Kiribati, as far up as the Marshall Islands. This cloud here, of course, is the tuna fleets going out to catch tuna, and the fuel vessels coming out from Linda Point to resupply those ships at sea, across the Vanuatu, up to the Solomons, and then routes, our main trade supply routes, down to Auckland and across to Brisbane, a few ships that come to us from America and Hawaii. So that's our shipping situation at the moment. Fiji, like the rest of the Pacific, is of course a heavily maritime nation. We don't have highways and fast rail, meta-urban transport systems. For us, maritime shipping is probably the most important form of transport that we have. And the COVID epidemic that we've just been through proved that countries like Fiji can survive without air connectivity. It's very difficult. It hurts the economy very badly. We lose all our tourism, but we can survive without air traffic. We cannot survive without shipping. Okay, so you all know the shipping services that we have in Fiji, old, second-hand, end-of-life vessels by and large, all running on expensive diesel, all incredibly expensive to maintain and operate. And we're suggesting that there is a silver lining in the climate change crisis, that the work our Pacific people are doing in the IMO is about to unlock serious revenue, and we're asking for that revenue to be spent back here on our domestic shipping routes, so that we can also match step with the global transition and get ourselves greener, more appropriate, more affordable shipping through this technology transfer. Why do I think that it's possible to achieve this transition? Part of the reason is because you've already done it in the past. Back in the oil crisis in the 1980s, when fuel prices increased 15 times, there were a number of experiments that happened in the Pacific, especially in Fiji, to try and get us shipping that didn't require such expensive fuel bills. This was the government shipping service vessel of the fleet, the 6-year-old Matui Cell, a 300-ton general purpose vessel, diesel operated vessel. And with money from ADB, we retrofitted this ship with a soft sail sailing rig. The rig was designed by Colin Phillip. The masts and the spars were designed by his father, Tony Senior. This was all constructed and fitted in Walu Bay. And this vessel was saving up to 30% fuel just by putting some sails on it. It increased the speed of the vessel, it made the vessel more comfortable, it reduced the engine wear. Had we fitted a folding propeller on that, we could have achieved far greater savings. So we're quite certain that using known technologies, that we could now work on your Fijian fleet and quite dramatically reduce the cost of the fuel to operate that vessel with technology like sails. At the same time, out in the Lau, on the island of Canberra, the Matui Sao on Canberra built this vessel entirely on the island from local timber, the Tai Canberra, and that vessel operated from 1984, I think, until when it was scuttled in 2006 in Suva Harbour. So for 25 years, you had a vessel that was operating under sail, servicing between the Lau, one of the hardest routes to service in Fiji, back and forth to Suva on a very regular service, and providing cheap transportation between the Lau and here. If you think about what it costs at the moment to travel out to the Lau on one of the private sector vessels or on the government shipping service vessels, these costs will just continue to increase as the price of fuel goes up. So those are a couple of examples from the past. Here's an example from right today. This vessel has just been launched in Korea. It's a 400-ton general purpose vessel for the Marshall Islands Shipping Corporation. This will service the outlying atolls up there in the Marshall Islands. This vessel will replace one of the government shipping service vessels, diesel-powered vessels that exist there at the moment. It's called a WASP, a wind-assisted sail propulsion vessel. So it's fitted out with sails, it's fitted out with solar panels, it's got alternator on the shaft, and the hull is maximized to for the efficiency of sail performance. This boat will be able to perform all the services that the diesel vessel did, but it will do it at only 20% of the fuel cost. So that's an 80% efficiency from one new vessel. And that vessel's just been launched in Korea last year and will arrive in the Marshalls next year. And that gives us a proof of concept demonstration ship that we can now start to look at how do we replicate and scale this vessel and start delivering it across the Pacific. The boat is designed to be built, it's got 3 masts, but we could lengthen this vessel, put a 4th mast in it, make it a 60-metre boat. We could put a 5th mast in it, make it a 75-metre boat, and more of the sort of scale of vessels that we're using in Fiji today. So there's proof of concept of what can be achieved with next generation shipping. Of course, if you look at the private sector commercial services that we do in Fiji, this is one of the Loma Beatty vessels, but we've now ended up in this vicious cycle where, because of the extreme cost of running shipping and the lack of profitability in the shipping service, we've ended up in the cycle where we purchase old vessels at scrap value, paying nothing more than $1 or $2 million for a 5,000-ton vessel that would cost many, $100 to $200 million to buy that vessel brand new. What sort of solutions can we offer up for this fleet? Well, that would mean transitioning to new vessels. This boat here is called the Neoline. It's been built in France right at the moment. It's a Ro-Ro vessel. It's designed, it's funded by Renault and Fiat. And the purpose of this vessel is to take electric cars, trucks, and electric machinery from France across to Canada. So this boat's a similar sort of size to the Loma Beatty vessels, but we could build this boat a little bit smaller, around about 2,000 ton, operate that boat extremely efficiently on most Fijian routes, and saving this boat's designed to save 70% of fuel. You still has a small diesel electric motor in the back, but it's also designed so that once new generation fuels like hydrogen, ammonia, methanol come on stream, that they can also be brought into play, and then that would make this vessel 100% fuel efficient. So this is where we need to target to go. The question, of course, is how do you ever afford to buy a vessel like this, possibly $40 to $50 million for a boat, when no one in Fiji can afford to pay that sort of money for a boat. So if we go back to what I was saying earlier about the levy, financing will be available within the next 5 to 10 years to allow this type of vessel to be purchased. We could go a lot earlier, go to the Green Climate Fund and try to put together an application for $100 to $150 million to get a range of these vessels working as proof of concept across the Pacific. Fiji, with its size, would be a logical place to base the first of one of these ro-ro vessels. So we have this, it's not really a technology problem, it's more of a financing problem. And part of the issue that we have is that the Pacific has put so much emphasis on investing in renewable energy. Our regional partners and bilateral donors, Asian Development Bank, World Bank, the European Union, Kiwis, the Australians, the Japanese, the Koreans, have poured something like $2 billion across the region in trying to transition our electricity sector away from diesel electricity generation to renewable energy. At the same time, we've forgotten about our shipping. And shipping, although our transport sector uses the majority of fuel in the Pacific, for various reasons, the donors decided that they would start with the electricity sector. And while we've had something like a $2 billion investment in renewable electricity, we haven't matched this with the same level of investment that we could put into shipping and to transition the shipping sector. In fact, there's been less than $25 million invested in the last decade in this critical supply sector. Most of that money has actually come through the centre that we run, German funding for a new vessel, Swire Shipping, a little bit of money into SBC. So until we start encouraging our donors to invest in this sector, we're not going to make it. What should we invest in? So the Pacific Blue Shipping Partnership was announced by our previous Prime Minister and President of the Marshall Islands. It's a partnership led by the Marshall Islands and Fiji and involves the same countries that are supporting the Marshall Islands in the international maritime negotiations at the moment. But we were asking, what's the flip side of the international negotiations? How do we now take the benefits from what's happening internationally and apply that to our domestic shipping? And what I'd like to lay out in the next few slides is a theory of change as to how we might achieve a transition for our domestic shipping. There's an ocean of available technology out there right at the moment. Numerous technologies, numerous new fuels, new electric outboard motors, solar panel ferries, electric tugboats, electric outboard motors, sails on most sorts of ships. This technology is coming on stream at speed in the international market. How do we ensure that we will not be left behind? Well, first thing is we need to work out which of these technologies are appropriate in the Pacific. Many of the technologies been introduced in the first world, in America and in Europe. Scandinavians in particular are leading this charge at the moment, simply aren't currently appropriate for us to start thinking about bringing into the Pacific. They're not advanced enough in their technology. They're still in their research and development phase. Many of them use technologies and fuels that we simply don't have here in the Pacific at the moment. So we've been working at a research level, and we work with numerous partners around the world, trying to work out which of these new technologies we could implement here in the Pacific straight away. Wind, because of the trade routes, the trade winds that blow across the Pacific, wind energy is free. And so, of course, wind adaptation and wind hybrid propulsion, like the new vessel that we've just built for the Marshall Islands in Korea, like the nearline ro-ro vessel that's been built in France at the moment. Flattener rotors could be applied to almost probably about 40% of the big ships that come in here at the moment. We could transition from 2-stroke to 4-stroke electric outboard motors. We have designs for hospital ships that are wind sail assisted. We could do a lot of work on propulsion systems and propellers. Cowlings on those would be some assistance to our vessels. And we also need to ask what the solution for the outboard fibres is and build a renaissance around sail power at a village-based level. So there's a range of technologies available out there today at the moment, or coming on stream at the moment, which could be applied almost immediately in the Pacific. So I want to just take you back over the last 10 years since the research program that we initiated originally at USP back in 2012 and supported then by the Fiji government. Shipping was sight out of mind. Everybody was focused on renewable electricity, and the Marshall Islands was the chair of the Pacific Island Forum in 2013 and became the first country in the Pacific to set hard targets in the Marjorie Declaration on Climate Change Leadership in 2013, and they wanted to reduce their transport emissions as well. The Samoan Pathway, the United Nations level, finally included transport and shipping in 2014. We had it included in the Suva Declaration in 2015. The Suva Declaration was the basis of the Pacific's charge to Paris. The Paris Agreement, shipping is not included in the Paris Agreement because it's international emissions and governed by the IMO. In 2018, the Fiji government, USP, hosted the regional workshop and conference on transport decarbonisation, and the Nutall Declaration, which was signed by several of our countries at that time, starts to set targets for shipping emissions reduction. And the Pacific Blue Shipping Partnership announced in 2019. Marshall Islands has updated its NDC in 2020 to include hard targets, 40% reduction in shipping emissions by 2030 and full reduction, 100% decarbonisation by 2050, and Fiji followed shortly after to also meet that NDC target. So we've put the policy framework in place that over the last 10 years now provides us a policy platform in order to launch a serious attack on reducing our dependency on diesel and reducing our emissions in shipping. And as I said earlier, there's a range of technologies that aren't quite there yet, but if we did have them, would be incredible game breakers. We're going to need new fuels at some point. To get that new fuel, we're going to need renewable electricity in order to make hydrogen. OTEC technology, sucking up deep seawater and converting that to electricity using heat exchanger and temperature differential, is technology that's been brought to us by the Koreans. We're currently building a prototype for a small OTEC power station in the Marshall Islands, and if that proves successful, that provides us a source of cheap renewable electricity, and we can start playing the hydrogen game. Wing ships. Wing ships are boats that fly on little wings and create a cushion between the surface of the water and the aircraft, and allow savings of up to 70% in fuel. These ships, they're not actually planes, although they look like planes, land and take off on the water and create an air cushion underneath them, which can save up to 70% of fuel. Down in New Zealand, we've now got electric tugboats, but New Zealand has the advantage over the Pacific that most of our electricity is renewably made anyway, and so when we use electricity in a tugboat, we're not generating any emissions. This technology is not available to us in Fiji today because most of our electricity is made out of diesel. So it would be sort of quite strange to say I've got a green ship, but I had to burn all this diesel in order to make the electricity to power it. Once we start to resolve our electricity problem in Fiji and move to a full renewable electricity generation, this technology will then become available to us as well. Electric outboard motors, yes, they're coming. No, they're not quite here yet. Very expensive. The batteries that you need to operate them are large and heavy. We don't have enough range in them yet, but this is a fast-moving technology, and we expect in the next 5 to 8 years that electric outboard motors will become affordable and battery power packs will become sophisticated enough to give us range to run electric outboard motors. Hydrogen fuel cells, electric ferries, these vessels here with different sorts of fixed wing sails are now being fitted on a number of large ships around the world. Foiling vessels, popping your boat up out of the water and running it on foils at 40 knots is an incredibly efficient way of using shipping. A lot of innovation around this sort of work, but it's not quite at market, yet. So what we're doing as part of our research program is trying to track all these developments, and we're going, okay, they're not really quite here for us yet. They will be coming in the future. So let's put them over here on the shelf for future potential and keep an eye on them and watch the development for when they become appropriate for us to start using out on the ocean. Now we need to put a couple of foundation things in place. We're talking about a paradigm shift in the way that we operate, and we're going to need to change our practices a little bit. And we've identified 4 foundation measures that we need to put in place now in order to enable this technology transition, this revolution in technology to happen over the next few years. And the first thing that we must invest in, and why I'm sitting here in a university talking to you, is we must invest in research and education. We must invest in that in a number of different levels, both the crews that will operate the vessels, but also in the people that are going to develop the science and technology behind these vessels. We cannot do this without a serious investment in research and education. Whoops, wrong way. Second foundation measure. There is no point us bringing new vessels into the Pacific if we can't look after and maintain them. And we need to accept that our slipways, the industrial services that we have for maintaining our vessels are now antiquated and broken, and we need to invest in new slipways. Down here in Fiji, we need them up north in Micronesia, we need them out west in Vanuatu and the Solomon Islands. But it's absolutely pointless. It would be a very bad investment to us to try and unlock the financing to allow Fiji to get brand new ships if we cannot maintain them properly. So that's the second foundation. We need to start with research and education. We need to ensure that the maintenance capacity to look after our new ships will also be here when they arrive. Third thing we need to do, data. It's incredibly hard to build a business case to take to somewhere like the Green Climate Fund and say, we need some money, without being able to say, how much money do we need? And to say, how much money do we need to understand what our shipping is. How much fuel do we burn? How many miles do we travel? How many passengers do we carry? How much cargo is shifted? How often are our boats maintained? So we really do need to get our heads around data collection and data management, and we need to get a whole lot better at that. Fourth thing we need to do, we need to strengthen our institutions. Shipping is not just boats on the water. Shipping is also about the policy work that happens, the regulation, the safety, the enforcement, keeping our people safe, keeping our vessels safe. That requires a major investment in strengthening up our institutional capacity in MSAF and the Ministry of Transport to ensure that we have sufficient government capacity to control and regulate and enforce this transition that's coming. So those are the 4 foundational measures that we see are necessary for us to implement now in order for us to start this transition. Okay, let's say that we could do that. We put in place the foundation measures. we start introducing our initial technologies, we're looking at new technologies and researching them out. So it's just a case of rinse and repeat. Work on what new technologies we can bring in. At some point, we will reach a point where we can get large savings. You know, we can get up to 80% savings using existing technologies on some ships. But generally, to get all of our NDC targets, to get 100% reduction, we're going to need to move to new fuels. And those are going to be hydrogen, methanol, ammonia, biofuels, and electrification. So we can get so far with technology that we know about at the moment, but sooner or later, we're going to have to adopt new fuels to get there as well. So I hope that gives you, the other thing we need is friends. You know, I've spent most of my academic life working in different parts of the Pacific, and as much as I value our Pacific institutions and the amazing work they do, and I salute the University of Fiji for the leadership that it is showing in many fields, we need to build an academic alliance in order to be able to tap into all the knowledge that is known around in order to empower our people for this change. And so the other thing that we've been doing is putting together an academic network, the University College of London, the University of Hawaii, Melbourne, the International Windship Association, the College of the Marshall Islands, the Korean Research Institute on Ships and Oceans in Korea, the Hochschule Emden Lehr in Germany, Columbia Law School in America, and the Solomon Islands National University are currently part of a network of academic institutions that we're trying to put together to act as a blanket or a safety valve, you know, a support network as we take this transition further. So I hope that was useful. How do I stop sharing the screen, Seta? How did that work for you, Maseti?
Well, thank you very much. Beautiful indeed. There was a beautiful sharing from Dr. Nutall. A lot of things that we are learning new today about sailing. Really mesmerizing that way, because the sea was our main transport area back in just about 100 years ago. And here today you are bringing to us the importance of going back traditional in trying to conserve energy and to try and protect the planet that we live in. Just to open up the discussion today, I've seen that you've, from the practicalizing of traditional sailing into the modern aspect of sailing, and also now into the regionalism and the international arena, where discussions and dialogues have been going on. It's very interesting that you brought up the Blue Pacific and the Salmon pathway. How real is this to the documents that has been passed in these regional forums?
Yeah, so when we started looking at this back over a decade ago, and we made the assumption it was all about the technology. We just needed to get better and newer technology, and it didn't take us very long at all to work out that it's not really a technology game. There's lots and lots of technology that we can use out there. What we were missing was policy, and we needed the policy to unlock the financing. Now, it's taken quite a long time in order to start to build that policy network. Fiji and Marshall Islands have definitely been leading this area, but we need to adopt national action plans that set out very clearly what the transition aspirations of each country are, so that we can go collectively and use the collective strength of a number of countries to unlock the resourcing that's going to be required. We estimate we need an investment across the ocean of something like $500 million immediately. That would give us sufficient mass to start moving this thing forward at speed. One of the reasons we've got such bad shipping at the moment is because there simply isn't any commercial investment that's available easily, and there is no insurance to back it up. So if you're someone like the Patterson brothers or George Gunda, you want to get new shipping, the cost of borrowing the money to get that shipping, and then It's very risky if you can't insure it. So if we want to break that cycle, we actually need a large investment. $500 million is what is the minimum that we estimate is required immediately in order to start being able to build that investment environment and de-risk it and able to do it. So that's our primary thrust at the moment, is to get that policy in place and the financing mechanisms in place to allow us to transition forward.
Thank you, Dr. Tal. Beautiful. Now the floor is open, ladies and gentlemen. I see Professor Shaista Shamin, VC, is putting up her hands. Ma'am, all yours.
Thank you very much. I'm traveling at the moment in a car, not driving. Mr. Mubarak is driving, thank goodness. Otherwise, I would be able to ask this question. Dr. Nutall, thank you so much for your really interesting and important seminar today. I think your slides really revealed a lot of what the work that you've been involved in for such a long time. You might know, of course, you will know that we have a drawer program, and Captain Sethereki has been the forefront of that. We have been doing that in support of climate change efforts and research, and I think you're quite aware of it. The first time I saw the drawer, in fact, you were there, so at Wunda Marina, and so I was quite fascinated with that vessel, small though it was. The potential for that was huge, and I was interested in your range of different fuel that you've mentioned. You've talked about electricity of a different type, perhaps. I wasn't quite clear about that, with the renewable electricity and other things, even wind. But, I'm actually finding it quite difficult to think about how the big companies, you've got a problem with fossil fuel in the world, fossil fuels, and then you've got the tankers that are associated with carting the oil from one place to another, and here we are expecting the tankers who are making millions and millions of dollars to actually, sorry about that, to do, millions of dollars just to be able to cart the things that we don't want from one end of the world to the other, but also what we can't do without, which is, petrol in our cars, diesel, and so on. So I'm finding it really difficult to understand how we're going to convince these big private companies. I don't have a problem with governments. I think governments are pretty much associated with trying to get the emissions down to a certain level so that the earth doesn't, disappear in the near future. But the tankers and the big companies are not so enamored of reducing carbon emissions. And I was told just last week when I attended a meeting of the Pacific Forum Island, not ministers, but they were members, on an ECOS decision that is coming up in Hamburg in a couple of weeks, about how all the COPs were completely undermined by the big oil companies' lobby against reducing those carbon emissions. In other words, we're not just talking about an agreement and negotiation between governments and among people and communities. We're actually talking about people in whose interest it is to continue to have carbon emissions, not reduced to the 1.5 that everyone else wants. So that's my first issue. Like, how are you going to convince the big companies? The second question is to do with, I'm not sure whether you mentioned this in your talk because I've had intermittent internet, but whether you thought about nuclear fusion as a way of an alternative fuel source, because our School of Science and Technology recently, and you might want to see this paper, has done an excellent paper of what we would need to do, and it's all, there's a prejudice against nuclear, I understand that very well. I was part of the anti-nuclear and decolonization movement in the Pacific in the 1970s, and I know there's a prejudice about nuclear, and there's all these ANZUS treaties and whatnot, but at the end of the day, we have to look at a fuel source which will not expect people to go back to the sails, which they will say is just not efficient enough. So have you thought about that kind of investigation into that alternative fuel that you're talking about? And finally, you've mentioned also institutions and how important institutions are in terms of getting together to work in partnership with other institutions. Of course, the University of Fiji would like to put its hand up to be part of the partnership network. You're already an adjunct professor, so I don't think that would be an issue for us. But we would like to very much be part of that conversation as well. So just those 3 points that I would like to raise. I don't want to take up too much because I'm sure there'll be other people with questions as well. Thank you.
No, thank you, Vice Chancellor, and I'll try and answer them quickly. Yes, this is the huge arm wrestle and the David and Goliath battle of our age and our generation. And shipping very much is hand in glove with oil. You've got to get your oil to market, and you've got to put oil in your ship to run your ship. So how to reduce that is nothing. It's almost impossible, I would say, for nation states working on their own to force that level of regulation. What's happened at the International Maritime Organization, which is the UN body that regulates all shipping, of course, has been nothing short of quite an incredible revolution. I had very low expectations of the organisation, and I am still highly suspicious of the organisation. However, there is a transition happening at this point within the shipping industry where people recognise that they simply won't be able to run oil-based shipping in the next 20 to 30 years. And so having come to that conclusion, the carrot that we're offering is the revenues that would be generated from this levy. So we're talking revenues of around about 80 to 100 billion dollars a year. We're talking over $1.5 trillion that would become available to the shipping industry to undertake that transition. That's quite a large carrot. The stick is to apply a global fuel standard, and again, I take my hat off to the Pacific delegations that have been leading the charge in these negotiations, but we have agreement at IMO just secured last year that we will now put a global fuel standard in place that lowers the greenhouse gas intensity of maritime fuels quite significantly and successively in steps in 2030, 2040 and 2050. So it doesn't get us there, it's still a long way to go. We're all in thrall to oil. We've become entirely addicted to oil, and we've grown a monster inside the oil industry that is now incredibly hard to control. However, there is also a highly progressive arm to the shipping industry, and the shipping industry is incredibly rich and powerful, that is now pushing them back against this, and it's that industry commitment that it offers us, salvation going forward. Your next question was around fusion versus fission. So the fuels of the future, the fuel of the future cannot be oil. So what choices do we have? Wind power, of course, is available to us and can get us some part of the way down the track, but doesn't get us all the way down the track. Electricity, yes, you can run small ships, short distance on electricity, but it has to be renewable to get there. Otherwise, you're just burning more oil. But the real fuels for shipping are going to come from hydrogen, methanol, and ammonia, which are hydrogen carriers. In order to unlock that, you need, again, renewable electricity to do it. So the shipping industry is saying that of that $1.5 trillion they're going to need to invest, around about 75% of it is going to have to be invested into electricity in order to make this next generation fuel. And you might have seen CRISO, our Korean partners, research partners, pop up on one of the slides. They are doing work right at the moment into mini nuclear power packs for running shipping. It's fraught with difficulty. There's political contention, of course, in the Pacific. But there have also been enormous advances made in micro nuclear power propulsion plants just in the last 5 years, and they're expecting to make major breakthroughs. So I'm not ruling nuclear out as a potential solution. There's a very strong lobby at the IMO that is pushing very hard. America obviously is heavily involved. And your third question was about partnerships. And yes, I hope you enjoy that you're already, through our association, a part of this partnership, and it's definitely an area that we would like to develop further with the University of Fiji. Does that answer your questions, BC?
Yeah, Vinaka, Dr. Nutall, that's fantastic. I do like your different scenarios for different energy sources, and I do agree that with you that it's ideological on nuclear, and would have been one of the first ones. But really, we have to look at the fuel source. I mean, the whole idea about saving the planet is so important. It's an existential crisis for us, but at the same time, people don't want to lose the benefits of industrialization either. So that's the conundrum, that we face. So I think if there is a solution that is clean and doesn't harm the planet, then I think we should pursue it and, use politics and policy to be able to get over any of the prejudices that we have. So Vinaka.
I guess my final comment on that, VC, would be we need knowledge in order to make the right choices. And so here we are back at education and research as being the foundation of how we make decisions once again.
Yeah, Vinaka, thank you.
Vinaka, Professor Shamim, we have exactly 5 more minutes before we end our session. If there is any other questions from the floor, this is the time to raise that burning question.
Well, I either bored everyone senseless or I confused them too much,
Well, it's an interesting topic, particularly a person like me who reads into issues like sailing of Tupaya and all the other seafarers of the day during the time. But anyway, you mentioned that the sailing is very uneconomical in Fiji, and one of the longest sailing is about 1,000 kilometers. And it's amazing that our forefathers would, traverse these seas in those big canoes, which can carry 100+ people. Looking at that and discussing the way forward in terms of going traditional and trying to save the climate and to save the world. Building of those large canoes, we have the Nutall in Fiji, we have which other one in Samoa and Tonga that you were talking about. Is it possible to bring it back?
Let me just unpack that slightly, And yeah, I'm in awe of Pacific Sailing Heritage. I've studied it for the last 40 years. I've sailed on. I built Ebola Singer Bow. They're incredible, amazing, absolutely amazing. I'm not suggesting for a moment that the modern solution for shipping should be old wooden dugout sailing boats. But there's 2 reasons why they are critically important. Firstly, wind is part of the solution going forward, and we need to break down the prejudice around wind, that it's old-fashioned, quaint, slow and inefficient. We are going to need sailors in the future that can not only operate motors, but can operate sailing rigs. And the easiest way to do that is to revalorize the heritage and to get young people sailing again, so that this becomes an ordinary way of life for them. So the Drua was an attempt, rebuilding the replica Drua was an attempt to revalorize, revitalize, regenerate that sailing tradition, which has only been lost in the last couple of generations. But we also need to accept the fact that Pacific navigators and boat builders of the past were incredibly innovative people. They could take problems where they had limited resource base, no metal, and move past that and develop the most effective, the most efficient ships in the world. And that's the mentality that we need to reinstill in our young people today. How did our ancestors approach these problems? How did they find the solutions? And then we need to do the same thing again today.
Thank you, Dr. Nutall. Well, a minute to go, ladies and gentlemen, member of the forum. If there's any comment or if there's any question, this is the golden opportunity, or forever hold your peace. Well, Dr. Nutall, on behalf of the academics colleagues of the University of Fiji, on behalf of the Vice Chancellor of the University of Fiji, and all the students and all those who are listening in this beautiful Brown Bag seminar, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you once more. Thank you for being with us and sharing with us that knowledge, given that the Nroa is with us and everybody's attention to the Nroa is heightened at this point in time because of the project that we just undertaken. Until we meet again, Professor Dr. Nutall, and on behalf of the colleagues here on the floor, we're listening to this beautiful Brown Bag seminar. Nisamode, ladies and gentlemen, until we meet again, Nisamode.
Vanaka Vakalevu, Mosesi, Vanaka Vakalevu.